lay in a pile of snow at the foot of a slender aspen tree, slowly bleeding out. A vivid crimson pool had formed an ever-widening circle near the wound in her thigh. Just before Brad's father had left, taking the 2 kids with him, he had bragged that he could have easily killed Anna if he had wanted to. Brad didn't doubt this. Lee was a survivalist who had spent much of his adult life living in a cabin in the Maine wilderness. He could fell an elk from a distance of 600 yards with a rifle he had built himself out of spare parts. Anna was only alive for now because he hadn't intended to kill her. Brad knew his father better than to think he was being generous in sparing Anna's life. More than likely, this was one of his cruel tests, one that Brad would only pass if he used the skills Lee had taught him as a boy to save Anna's life. Lee loved playing games like this. Once, when Brad was 13, he had abandoned him in the woods, and Brad had been forced to walk 20 miles home through the howling winter, armed only with a half-empty jar of peanut butter and a navigational compass. Before driving off in their only vehicle, Lee had hurled one last verbal volley. "You can't trust her, Bradley," he had yelled, gun in hand. "She's been playing you from the start." It had been crazy, the deluded ravings of a paranoiac who had hastily cobbled together his own religion in the aftermath of the pandemic that had decimated the world's population. And yet, Brad couldn't stop thinking about it. His father was good at a lot of things, but he was especially good at this, at reframing the world so that white was black and black was white. If there hadn't been an element of truth in Lee's accusation, maybe it wouldn't have bothered him so much. But in the months Brad had known her, Anna had proven fickle and often unworthy of trust. As he knelt at the foot of the tree, heedless of the low growl from an emaciated pine marten nestled in an overhead branch, he reflected once again on the fact that she had left him. Had left him twice, actually, for reasons that must have made sense in her addled mind, but which struck Brad as bizarre and irrational. "I'm sure you're a great guy," she had written in the note he found pinned to the table the first time she fled. "But you're also a guy who can break a lock with an axe in one blow, and I've got a kid to take care of." Brad had never forgotten this. He resented her for it, even now. If only she had been brave enough to argue the point with him instead of running, he might have persuaded her to change her mind. Surely a man who could break a lock in one blow was exactly the sort of man you wanted by your side when the world ended. If your first priority was protecting your son, surely he would be the best person to help you. But of course, this hadn't occurred to Anna. She never thought. She just acted, and left other people to deal with the consequences of actions done in haste. If she had been less afraid, if she hadn't given in to her panicked impulses, if she had been willing to talk to him instead of just running, things might have turned out differently. As it was, he had a horrible feeling he was just setting himself up for future heartbreak by saving her life. Lee had been wrong about most things, but he was right about that. In spite of this, there was a sensitivity at his core that would never let him abandon Anna while there was still a chance of saving her life. That was what distinguished him from his father, who had no qualms about shooting a young woman, a mother of one child and a guardian of one other. Lee must have anticipated how Brad would react, must have known when he fired the bullet that Anna would be horribly injured, but still had a chance at survival, provided that Brad acted in a timely fashion. In spite of their mutual hatred, they retained this warped bond of trust. Brad knew that his father still respected him, and the knowledge made his hatred burn brighter. He couldn't think about that. Not now. Right now, the most pressing question was how to save Anna. He would need to apply a bandage if he wanted to staunch the flow of blood, but his first aid kit currently lay in the glove compartment of his father's car that was now traveling some miles down the road toward the imaginary line that had once been the Canadian border. Brad would have to make his own bandage out of clean cloth, but the only material available was a plain white shirt he was wearing under his coat and over a now musty-smelling pair of long underwear. Already, cleanliness was becoming one of those strange artifacts of the pre-nanobot world, about which future generations would whisper in disbelief. Carefully, cautiously, Brad opened his coat and ripped off a strip of shirt at the torso. The cold was like a pair of pincers lacerating his exposed skin. Anna was wearing only a thin coat, but she didn't seem to notice the cold. The pain of the wound in her thigh had rendered her insensible to the wind's buffets.